The book of Job has unnerved, frightened, and confused Christians for millennia. I wonder, maybe just maybe, if we get the core message, you just may be surprised. We'll talk about it. Welcome to Gospel Rant Podcast and Dr. Bill Senyard YouTube channel. I'm your host, Dr. Bill Senyard. We are free wherever you get good podcasts, of course on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways you can help us grow is by leaving your comments below. Thank you sincerely for that. And thanks for making Gospel Rant Podcast one of the top 10% podcasts in the world. Thank you for listening every week. We hope that it helps you regularly hear about God's love for the unlovable, the unloved, the unlovely, the unworthy, and the unlikely. And that's all of us on any given day if we were just a little bit honest. The Sting, 1973, is one of the best movies of all time. The movie won 7 Oscars, including Best Picture. One of the more memorable scenes in the movie was the smoky poker game pitting the angry gangster boss Doyle Lonigan, Robert Shaw, against the legendary con man Henry Gondorff, played by Paul Newman. The con man is conned by his apparent mark. That's the sting. Job is a grand sting. So imagine with me that the brief, disturbing conversation between God and Satan in heaven, right? Job chapter 1, 6-12, was in fact a celestial sting about to go down. And what's the wager? Who's the mark? Consider the following fictional rendition of the events leading up to Job's demise. Satan. Yahweh, forgive me for saying this, but none of your loyal agents will dare say it, at least to your face. Your real problem is not with me or my followers. Oh, no, not at all. With all due respect, the real embarrassment is from the race of humankind. You've invested so much into them, your reputation is tied up with them. It's time to cut your losses. Certainly the all-seeing one can see that they have a fatal flaw that was created in them. They cannot truly be faithful, Yahweh. Is that so, Dustcrawler? Satan. Clearly it is so. With all due respect, are you too far removed, too unobjective to clearly see? I am sorry to raise my voice, but really, Your Holiness, are you so blind? Everyone else can see what is happening on earth. What is it in humanity that you still cling to? Do I need to remind you about Eve or Adam or Cain or Noah? Look at the violence, the deceit, the self-serving. What is it with you deities? Name one who is truly faithful, even one. In every con, the hook must be set. Satan brilliantly continued. I would bet that if you stopped underwriting them, they would also stop worshiping you. They're animals. They only worship themselves. They will come to your table and flatter you as long as you feed them, as long as you stroke their fur. They will pretend faithfulness. But if the gravy train ends, they will quickly find another god. Satan smirks. Yahweh pauses, apparently considering the challenge from the deceiver, and bites down hard on the bait. Takes it, hook, line, and sinker, so it would appear. God. Serpent, have you seen my faithful servant Job? He is what I'm talking about. You have always been such a disappointment, really. But Job, he is heroic in his devotion to me. Look, Snake, see how he loves me in the way that only humans truly can. He not only preaches it, he walks the walk. I can trust him explicitly. There is nothing that he loves more than me. Satan is about to wet himself. He is so excited. Yahweh has indeed taken the bait, eaten it whole. Licking his chops, he only needed now to tie up all the loose ends. There must be no escape this time. Satan. Job, eh? Impressive record of devotion, even for humans, but honestly, look how you have singularly blessed him. Is that what you have to do to earn worshipers? Anyone would love you if you gave them the riches, glory, and power that you gave Job. That's no trick, really. That is what I'm saying. Humans will only love if they get something out of it. There is no unconditional love or faithfulness in the race. They are worship whores. They are innately self-centered, selfish to the core. Narcissists, really? Maybe they are in your image after all. God. Beware lest you cross the line, O foolish creature. You have felt my anger once before. Nevertheless, I am intrigued at your challenge. What is it you have in mind? Satan. Well, here's the wager. I will, with your permission, remove Job from all the things that he is using you for. His wealth, his comfort, his family, and his reputation. Then everyone will see what is really in his heart. Mark my words, he will turn on you. He will not just accuse you of unfaithfulness, but he will take the next step of publicly condemning you legally for it. God. Done. Satan. Not so fast. To make it fair, Job can't know what's going on. Even humans can put up with a lot if they know that it's temporary and will eventually be restored. He must be in the dark. That's the only reasonable test of his heart. Will he remain covenantly true to you when bad things happen to him unfairly, that is, off the justice grid, or will he curse you to your face? Injustice, real injustice, has that way of clearing the head and exposing the heart. No matter what, you can't step in and explain the trial to Job. He must finish the trial on his own. Agreed? God. Agreed. And the wager? Satan. If indeed the faithful Job legally and publicly condemns you as unfaithful, then you must also publicly admit that your plan for mankind is an abysmal failure, and that you can see that there is no good in your highly touted image bearer. The so-called seed of the woman that you spoke about a while back will have been proven to be a failed experiment. God. And if I win, Satan, in the slight chance that Job remains faithful to you, and by that we mean that he chooses to not publicly condemn you as guilty of unfaithfulness, then I will publicly admit my failure. I will admit the possibility of humanity's potential glory. God. Let it be so, heel biter. Only you have no permission to kill Job. Satan. Of course. There are far worse things. Well, there it is. Job, because of his faithfulness, is being rewarded by being driven into the primordial battle over the very universe. Remember Genesis 3:15. God says that I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head and you will strike his heel. And so here we see the battle lines drawn between Satan and the seed of the woman, and in this case, Job. And Job's the ideal candidate, narratively, for both God and Satan. Job reflects the ideal character of fallen man. He is faithful, pious, righteous, selfless. He loves and fears God. Even God says so. If Job is exposed to be fair weather, a fair weather God-fearer, then let's face it, none of us have any hope. The hungry lion goes after the weakest of the herd. To make a very bold point, Satan is going after the strongest. So if Job's faith is not based on anything beyond the things that God gives him, if his love is so conditional and retributive, then there can be no real love from the soul of man for God. God picks Job for the same reason. Job is God's man. He is a true predecessor of God's only other faithful son, the perfectly faithful son, Jesus. So, the sting is set. But, hear this, from Job's point of view, the sting doesn't feel glorious at all. It feels like a great injustice. And why? Because it is. That's the nature of the sting. Job cannot know what the quest is all about. I mean, isn't that what really gets to us? Why do bad things happen to good people? How could God, a good God, allow innocents to perish in COVID or in the mudslides in Southeast Asia? How could God be good and just if he doesn't prevent such things? Job is a troubling and frightening story about an innocent man. Both God and Satan agree, they rarely do. He's subjected to harsh, unjust treatment agreed to by God himself. Whew. Yuck. The bad things that happened to Job did not occur because Job was unethical or sinful, but because he was innocent. And that is how we, the readers, are supposed to read the book. Are you still with me? I told you this was going to be unnerving and troubling, but also wonderful. You'll see what I mean. For the sting to be real, our innocent hero Job must be subjected to true injustices without any explanation from God, meaning God must be silent. This goes against everything that the retributive principle stands for. One commentator, Robert Sutherland, is very helpful here. He says, if human beings know with certainty that God rewards those who love him, they will serve God to what they can get from God. Undeserved evil is morally necessary. Whew. Undeserved evil, such testing is morally necessary in order to bring the existence of God into doubt and to sever any connection between righteousness and reward. Boy, that's crazy insightful. You probably don't want to hear it. I don't either. The losses must be real and felt by Job. But, and this is the important, because God is the God of the living and the dead, there are no permanent losses, only permanent glory. Godly wisdom can see that God's economy is based upon a higher heaven-sourced faithfulness, innate only to God. It is not innate to us. It is not in our DNA. It clings to God's goodness even in the presence of injustices, right? Remember, the cross was the perfect example of that. So in other words, there is no celestial victory for soldiers of fortune or mercenaries. To pull off the sting, which Job can't know anything about, he must remain faithful without clear assurance of payback or preservation or justice or explanation and restoration, consolation, right? He must really trust God and accept the loss to be victorious. And God must remain silent. Wow. God cannot disclose to Job, no matter how hard he prays, right, that he is in the midst of a sting. If he let Job know somehow, Satan's going to win. He would be admitting that Job couldn't love him for who he is versus what he does for Job. This tests for real faith, a heaven-born faith, a faith that's pure, spirit-born, that's from the being of God, versus a faith that is a function of circumstances, something that we choose. Boy, that's just weak. There's no power behind it, not really. Have you ever been in long seasons of injustice or loss or violation, and your sense was that God was silent or against you or has turned his back? I think that one of my greatest complaints to God is that he is silent when I most need him. But what if, like Job, he can't answer that question at that particular time? What if I'm being tested for the sake of glory? Well, who wins the level? If Job legally curses God to his face, Satan wins. And if Job does not, God wins. Job can accuse God of injustice until he is blue in the face. He can vent, complain, cry out, mourn, but to formally charge God with being in his very being unjust ends the sting. And think with me of the ramifications. If the judge is unjust, there is no real trial. There can only be a fair trial if the judge is just. Injustices can be dealt with, but not an unjust trial or an unjust judge. Humanity's hope is that the universe and God is ultimately just. He may use injustice to accomplish his ends, and by the way, he often does. Again, the cross. But in the end, there will be only justice because of the very innate nature of God. If God is not just, there is no moral universe, no hope for man, period. You can pray all you want. How can we survive such a level, particularly if God is silent and cannot speak into our suffering? Well, we have a huge advantage over Job. We have his story before us in writing. We know there is really a hope, even in the midst of gross suffering, obvious suffering. And we can ask God for that composite of faith from him, from his hands, through his spirit and his inner being, the fruit of the Spirit, and wisdom through his spirit and our inner being. We can during those times, but he may not give us answers. I get it. In the end, I'm going to answer these questions, hopefully to our satisfactions. And yeah, we're going to get back into it on the next podcast. So a few questions for study. If you're anything like me, this raises all kind of nasty questions. How is it kosher for a good God to do games like this? Would Job, even after it was all over, think that this was a good thing? Would he have thought this was a reward for his faithfulness? What about his family? We're going to have to talk about that. I mean, would they think that God is just or good? You know, if you went to anyone and said, I've got this, it was all a big sting by God, Job's loss of wealth, family status, comfort. Isn't that fantastic? You would be surprised at the looks you would get. Yeah. So discuss those things and, let me know what you think. Bill at gospel-app.com. Also, check out my new teen fantasy book, Shadowbound. It's available on Amazon and Kindle. It is C.S. Lewis-esque fantasy, but it's also an allegory of the book of Job. And my hope is that it's in sync with these podcasts that I'm doing and the YouTubes. And adults are loving it as well. Get it for your church's youth ministry, yeah? All right. Take heart, child of God. We'll see you next time.